My mom never hit me. She never yelled at me. She never told me she hated me. But she never defended me either. And it took her losing everything to finally understand what she lost first. Growing up, people used to say, I was lucky, a quiet home, a mother who cooked every night, a family that looked normal from the outside. What they didn't see was how often I stood alone in that house, explaining myself to everyone, while my mom sat there, silent. She saw what happened. She heard what was said. She knew when I was telling the truth. And every time she chose the same thing. Not me, not them either. She chose peace, or at least what she thought was peace. I remember standing there once, my hands shaking, my voice barely steady, waiting for her to say just one sentence. He's telling the truth. That's not fair. Stop. But she never did. And the worst part, she would look at me later and say, I didn't want to make things worse, as if I wasn't already breaking. For years, I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong, that I didn't need her to defend me. I stopped asking. I stopped explaining. I stopped expecting anything at all. And one day, I left. No screaming, no big fight, no dramatic goodbye, just silence, the same silence she had chosen all my life. Years later, when my phone rang and I saw her name on the screen, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't calling to check on me. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because the people she had protected, instead of me, had finally turned their backs on her. And that was the moment she began to understand what her silence had cost. If you've ever wondered whether staying quiet really keeps the peace, or if it slowly destroys the people who need you most, this story is for you. And before we continue, if stories about family betrayal, karma, and quiet emotional truths speak to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way, even if life gets busy, you won't miss the rest of this story, or others like it, that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Because what happened next wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but it changed everything. So let me ask you this. How many times can a mother stay silent before her child disappears forever? And when she finally understands, is it ever truly too late? When I was growing up, nothing about my family looked broken. From the outside, we were the kind of family people trusted. Clean house, dinner at the table, no shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My mom liked to say we were low drama, and for a long time, I believed that meant we were healthy. She worked hard. She kept the house running. She smiled when guests came over. If you asked anyone about her, they'd say the same thing. She's a good mother. She does everything for her kids. What they didn't see was what happened when no one else was watching. I wasn't the loud child. I wasn't the troublemaker. I was the one who stayed quiet, the one who tried to keep things smooth. When something went wrong, when words were said that crossed a line, when blame landed on me without reason, I would look at my mom, not to rescue me, not to fight my battles, just to say something, anything. Most of the time she didn't. She would keep her eyes on the table, or busy her hands with dishes that didn't need cleaning, or sigh and say, let's not turn this into a big deal. And that was the end of it. At first I thought that was normal. Adults didn't always step in. Kids were supposed to figure things out, but it kept happening. Small moments at first. A comment that wasn't fair. A story told wrong where I became the problem. A decision made without asking me, then blamed on me later. Each time I waited, each time my mom stayed silent. I remember one evening in particular. I don't even remember what the argument was about anymore. That's how small it should have been. But I remember standing there, heart pounding, trying to explain myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I was just trying to be understood. My mom was sitting a few feet away. She heard everything. She knew I wasn't lying. I could see it on her face. And still she said nothing. Later that night, she knocked on my door. She didn't apologize. She just said, "I didn't want to make things worse." That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else. Because worse for who? Not for me. I was already hurt. What she meant was worse for her. Worse for the peace she was trying to protect. Worse for the balance she didn't want to disturb. Slowly, I started to understand something. My mom wasn't choosing right or wrong. She wasn't choosing truth or lies. She was choosing quiet, and quiet always came before me. As the years passed, I learned how to adjust. I learned when to stay out of the way, when not to speak up, when to swallow things that didn't feel fair. People started calling me easy, independent, so mature for my age. My mom believed that too. She thought I was strong, that I didn't need as much support as the others, that I could handle things on my own. What she didn't realize was that strength I showed was something I learned out of necessity, not because I wanted to be strong, but because no one stepped in when I needed them to. By the time I was a teenager, something had already changed inside me. I still lived in that house. I still followed the rules, but I had stopped expecting my mom to stand beside me. And once you stop expecting, that you start pulling away in ways no one notices at first. What my mom didn't know then was that her silence was teaching me something. It was teaching me how to disappear quietly, and she had no idea what that lesson would cost her one day. The first time my mom truly didn't choose me, it wasn't loud. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no words anyone would remember years later. That's what made it hurt so much. I was still young enough to believe that if something was clearly wrong, an adult would step in. That day, something serious happened. Serious enough that it couldn't just be brushed away. Someone said I had done something I didn't do. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It was a lie, and it spread fast. I remember standing in the middle of the room, my chest tight, my face burning, listening to people talk about me like I wasn't even there. Every sentence made it worse. I looked at my mom. She was right there, close enough to hear every word, close enough to see the truth written all over my face. I didn't say much. I didn't know how. I was waiting for her to say, "That's not what happened. He wouldn't do that. Stop." She didn't. Instead, she said something else. "Let's calm down. Everyone's upset. We'll talk about this later." Later never came. What came instead was the quiet decision she made in that moment. She didn't defend me, but she didn't accuse me either. And somehow that felt worse, because her silence made the lie stronger. It told everyone in that room that maybe the accusation had some truth to it. After it was over, after people moved on to something else, I followed her into the kitchen. I asked her quietly, "Why didn't you say anything?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I didn't want to make a scene." That sentence again. A different day. Same excuse. I told her I was telling the truth. I told her I felt humiliated. I told her I needed her to say something. She looked tired. Not angry, not cold, just tired. She said, "I know you didn't mean any harm, but if I had taken sides, it would have caused more problems." That was the moment something clicked. Not snapped, not broke, clicked. I realized she wasn't waiting for the truth. She already knew it. She was weighing comfort against courage, peace against protection. And she chose what was easier. Over the next few weeks, things didn't go back to normal. People treated me differently. They were polite, but distant. The story had stuck, and my mom never corrected it. I stopped bringing it up. What was the point? At home, she acted like nothing had happened. She cooked. She asked about school. She reminded me to do my chores. But something between us had shifted. I had seen her choose, and she had seen me realize it. She started saying things like, "You're strong. You don't let things get to you. I wish the others handled things like you do." I nodded. I agreed. But inside, I was learning a dangerous lesson. That being honest didn't matter as much as being convenient. That telling the truth didn't always protect you, that sometimes silence wins. I also learned something else. If my own mother wouldn't speak up for me, when the truth was clear, no one else would either. So I adjusted. I became more careful with my words, more guarded with my feelings, more aware of when it was safer to stay quiet. My mom thought we had moved past it. She didn't realize that was the moment I stopped expecting her to be on my side. Years later, when she would say, "I never knew you felt that way," I would think back to that day, the day she had the chance to protect me, without yelling, without fighting, without causing chaos. All she had to do was speak, and she chose not to. What she couldn't see then was that choice didn't end that moment. It followed me, and it slowly taught me how to stand alone. After that day, nothing changed on the surface. No one brought it up again. No one apologized. No one explained. Life in our house kept moving forward, as if nothing important had happened. But for me, something had shifted quietly. I stopped trying to defend myself. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned how little my words mattered. When misunderstandings came up, I let them pass. When decisions were made without me, I adjusted. I became good at adapting. Too good. At home, my mom started relying on me more. I was the one who didn't complain, the one who didn't argue, the one who understood. If there was tension in the room, she would look at me and say, "Let's just keep the peace." And I did. I kept my tone calm. I kept my thoughts to myself. I learned when to leave the room before anyone noticed how quiet I'd become. My mom took my silence as strength. She would say things like, "You're the easy one. You don't need much. You can handle it." And maybe I could, but handling something doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Slowly, I started disappearing inside my own home. Not physically, emotionally. I spent more time in my room, more time out of the house, more time with my thoughts than with my family. When I spoke, I chose my words carefully. When I felt upset, I swallowed it. It was safer that way. I watched my mom defend others in small ways. A gentle excuse, a quick explanation, a soft redirect. Nothing dramatic, just enough to protect them. I noticed it every time. And each time, I wondered why that care never extended to me. I never asked her directly. I already knew the answer. She saw me as the one who could take it, the one who wouldn't fall apart, the one who didn't need saving. What she didn't see was how much effort it took to become that person. At family gatherings, I became the quiet presence in the corner. People talked over me. Decisions were made without my input. No one meant to be cruel. They just got used to me not pushing back. My mom would sometimes notice. She'd ask later, "Are you okay?" And I would say yes, because by then, I knew what would happen if I said no. She wouldn't argue. She wouldn't defend me. She would listen quietly and change nothing. So I learned to give her the answer that kept things calm. That's how I became invisible. Not because anyone forced me to disappear, but because being seen never felt safe. By the time I was old enough to understand what was happening, the pattern was already set. My mom depended on my silence. It made her life easier. It made the family smoother. And I let it happen. I told myself it was temporary, that once I was older, once I was out of the house, things would be different. But deep down, I knew something else was forming. A distance that didn't look like anger. A separation that didn't come with shouting. Just a quiet pulling away. My mom mistook that distance for maturity. She thought I was becoming independent, that I was learning how to handle life. She didn't realize that what I was really learning was how to live without her support. And that lesson, once learned, doesn't fade easily. Because when a child learns, they can't rely on their parents' voice. They start building a world where that voice doesn't exist at all. My mom didn't notice when I started doing that. Not at first. But one day, she would look back and wonder when I had become so distant. What she wouldn't realize was that distance didn't appear overnight. It grew slowly in the spaces where her silence lived. And by the time she noticed it, I had already learned how to stand alone. There comes a moment when holding things in becomes heavier than letting them out. For me, that moment didn't arrive in anger. It arrived in exhaustion. I was tired of guessing, tired of adjusting, tired of pretending I didn't notice what was missing. The conversation happened on an ordinary evening. No argument, no crisis, just two people in the same room, with years of unsaid words between them. I don't remember how it started. I only remember the feeling that if I didn't speak, then I never would. I asked her a question I had carried for a long time. Why didn't you ever defend me? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just asked. She looked surprised. Not defensive, not angry, just confused. She said, I didn't think you needed it. That wasn't the answer I expected. I told her about the moments she stayed silent, the times I stood there alone, the lies she let settle because it was easier. She listened. She nodded. And then she said something that changed everything. I thought staying neutral was the best thing. Neutral, as if what happened to me was a disagreement between equals, as if truth and falsehood deserved the same distance. I tried to explain how it felt, how her silence didn't feel neutral to me, how it felt like abandonment. She sighed, not in frustration, in discomfort. She said I didn't want to choose sides. That was it. That was the sentence that made it clear. She didn't see herself as choosing against me. She saw herself as choosing peace. I asked her quietly, but what about me? She didn't answer right away. When she did, her words were careful. You always seemed strong. You handled things better than the others. I didn't think it hurt you that much. I realized then that she had built an image of me that protected her choices. If I was strong, then her silence wasn't harmful. If I was independent, then she wasn't neglectful. That image mattered more to her than my reality. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Clarity. She wasn't going to see it the way I did. Not because she couldn't, but because doing so would mean facing what her silence had done. And she wasn't ready for that. The conversation ended quietly. No apology, no resolution. She told me she loved me. She said she had always tried her best. I believed her, and still something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I stopped hoping. That was the moment I stopped asking her to speak for me. Not because I didn't need it anymore, but because I understood she never would. After that night, I didn't bring it up again. Neither did she. We returned to our routine. Polite conversations, shared meals, safe topics, but the space between us had changed shape. Before I had been waiting. Now I was preparing for a life where her voice wouldn't be there when I needed it. She thought we had cleared the air, that things were better because there was no tension. What she didn't see was that I wasn't holding on anymore. I was letting go, quietly, and once that process begins, it doesn't look like rebellion. It looks like peace, the kind of peace that comes right before someone leaves. When I finally left, there was no big argument to point to, no last straw, no explosive moment that anyone could blame. That made it easier for everyone. I didn't announce it. I didn't sit my mom down and explain how much her silence had hurt me. I just made plans quietly. I saved money. I packed slowly. I chose a day that didn't mean anything special. When I told her I was moving out, she looked surprised. Not shocked, just caught off guard. She asked a few practical questions. Where I was going, if I had thought it through, when I needed help moving. She didn't ask why, and I didn't offer an explanation. There was a part of me that waited, just a little, for her to say something different this time, to ask me to stay, to tell me she understood. But she didn't. She nodded. She said, "You'll be fine." That sentence carried more weight than she realized. Not because it was cruel, but because it confirmed what I already knew. She believed I didn't need her. The day I left was quiet. I loaded my things into the car. She stood in the doorway, watching. No tears, no speeches. She hugged me and said, Call me when you get there." I did. She sounded relieved. That hurt more than anger would have. Life moved on quickly after that. For me, there was an unfamiliar sense of freedom. Not joy, not relief. Just space. I didn't have to measure my words. I didn't have to swallow things to keep the peace. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone to speak up for me. For my mom, my absence didn't feel like a loss. It felt like stability. One less tension to manage. One less person she worried might react. She told people I was doing well, that I was independent, that I had always been like that. And maybe that was true. But she never asked herself why. Over time, she stopped calling as often. Not out of anger, out of comfort. Our relationship became polite. Occasional updates, short conversations, no depth, no risk. And she mistook that for peace. She didn't see the trade being made. By staying silent for so long, she had taught me how to live without her involvement. And once you learn that distance feels normal. There were moments when she could have reached out differently, asked real questions, opened the door to difficult conversations. She didn't, not because she didn't care, but because she believed everything was fine. From her perspective, there had been no fight. No dramatic ending, so there was nothing to fix. From mine, the leaving had started years earlier. The physical distance just made it visible. She once said, "I'm glad you're so self-sufficient." She meant it as a compliment. I heard it as confirmation. Confirmation that my silence had done its job. What she didn't realize was that my self-sufficiency came at a cost. It cost her a front-row seat in my life. It cost her the closeness she assumed would always be there. And while she felt steady, while she believed things were settled, something else was quietly taking shape. A future where I wouldn't be the one to come back first. She didn't see that coming. She couldn't, because there was no fight to remember, only the calm she had chosen. And calm can be very misleading. Life didn't fall apart the day I left. That's something people don't talk about enough. There was no sudden collapse, no immediate regret, no dramatic realization. For a while, everything seemed fine. I built my life slowly, new routines, new responsibilities. I learned how to rely on myself in ways I hadn't before, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I had already learned how to stand alone. My mom watched from a distance. She liked hearing that I was doing well. It reassured her. It fit the story she told herself. That I had always been strong. That I didn't need much. That everything had worked out. For her, that meant she had done the right thing. Back home, the balance she worked so hard to protect started to shift. At first, it was subtle. Small conflicts that used to be redirected now lingered longer. Conversations grew tense. The person she had always stepped in for, the one she had protected without hesitation, began pushing boundaries. Requests became demands. Dependence turned into entitlement. My mom tried to smooth things over the same way she always had, by staying quiet, by avoiding confrontation, by hoping things would settle on their own. But without me there to absorb tension, there was nowhere for it to go. I heard about it secondhand. Through short phone calls, through careful updates. She never framed it as a problem, just stress, just a phase. I noticed something else, though. Her calls became less casual, more purposeful. She started asking questions she'd never asked before. How I handled certain situations, how I managed things on my own. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I had learned not to read too deeply into her words. But back home, things were unraveling. The person she had trusted most started making choices that affected everyone. Money issues, broken promises, a growing sense that something wasn't right. And for the first time, my mom didn't know how to fix it. She tried reasoning. She tried patience. She tried silence. None of it worked. The more she avoided addressing the truth, the more power it gave to the wrong person. The irony was quiet, but sharp. The same silence that had protected the peace for years was now feeding the problem. I wasn't there to witness the turning point, But I heard about the moment she realized things were serious. A betrayal she didn't expect. A boundary crossed she couldn't ignore. Someone she had defended for years showed her who they really were. And suddenly, the calm she had chosen felt fragile. For the first time, she was forced to confront a truth she had avoided her entire life. Avoiding conflict doesn't make it disappear. It just delays the cost. When she called me after that, her voice sounded different. Not broken, not desperate, uncertain. She didn't tell me everything. She never did. But I could hear the shift. She was standing in a situation where silence wasn't protecting her anymore. And she didn't know what to do. That's when something inside her began to crack. Not guilt, not regret, recognition. She started to see patterns, moments she had dismissed, choices she had justified. And slowly, uncomfortably, she began connecting them. She remembered the times she stayed quiet for peace, the times she told herself that silence was kindness, and she started wondering what that silence had allowed to grow. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me as the strong one. She was looking at herself, and what she saw wasn't the calm she thought she'd built. It was a fragile structure, held together by avoidance. I didn't know it yet, but that realization was the beginning of something she couldn't stop. Because once silence stops working, the truth has a way of demanding attention. And the next time my phone rang, it wouldn't be a casual check-in. It would be a call she had never expected to make. The call came on an ordinary afternoon. No warning, no buildup, just my phone lighting up with her name. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. Not out of anger, not out of spite, out of habit. I had learned to live without needing those calls. And she had learned to make them less often. When I answered, her voice sounded careful. Not warm, not cold, measured. She asked how I was doing. She mentioned the weather. She commented on something small. Then there was a pause. A long one. I waited. Finally, she said my name the way she used to when she needed something. And that's when I knew. She didn't say she missed me. She didn't ask if she could see me. She said, I don't know who else to talk to. That sentence landed heavier than any apology could have. She started explaining slowly, cautiously, as if choosing the right words might keep things from getting worse. Things at home weren't good. The situation she had tried to manage quietly had grown out of control. Promises had been broken. Trust had been taken for granted. Boundaries she never enforced had disappeared completely. She said she felt overwhelmed, confused. She said she didn't know how things got so bad. I listened, not because I felt obligated, but because I had learned how to listen without expecting anything in return. At one point, she stopped talking. Then she asked, Do you think I handled things wrong? That was the first crack. Not an apology, not accountability, but doubt. I chose my words carefully. I didn't accuse her. I didn't remind her of the past. I said I think silence works, until it doesn't. She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice sounded different, quieter. She asked if we could meet, just talk. I didn't answer immediately, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to understand what she was really asking for. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even asking for understanding. She was asking for support, something she had never learned how to give me. We met a few days later. She looked older than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. There was a tension in her posture, a hesitation in the way she spoke. She talked about the problems, about feeling taken advantage of, about not recognizing the people she had trusted. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said something that caught me off guard. I always thought you'd be the one who didn't need anything from me. She said it gently, like it was still true. That was the moment I realized how deep her belief ran. Even now, even when she needed me, she saw me as the stable one, the one who could handle things, the one who wouldn't ask her to look too closely at the past. She didn't say sorry that day. She didn't acknowledge how often she had left me alone. But she was sitting across from me, asking for advice, asking for help. And that alone was a reversal of everything I had grown up with. I felt something complicated rise in me. Not satisfaction, not resentment, awareness. I saw clearly then that she had come to me, not because she finally understood me, but because she had run out of places to hide. And the question wasn't whether I could help her. It was whether helping her would cost me something I had already fought hard to rebuild. As we sat there, the space between us felt different than before. Not closer, just honest. For the first time, she was facing the consequences of all the times she chose silence. And for the first time, I wasn't the one asking her to see me. She was asking me to stay. The second time we met, there was no small talk, no weather, no updates, just silence. Not the kind she used to hide behind, but the kind that comes when there's nowhere left to run. She looked at me for a long time before speaking. Then she said, "I think I messed up." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was the closest thing to honesty I had ever heard from her. She didn't start with me. She talked about everything else first. The decision she made to keep things calm. The compromises she told herself were harmless. The moments she avoided because she didn't want to feel uncomfortable. She said she believed that if she stayed quiet long enough, things would work themselves out. She paused, then added, "They never did." I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. She admitted she had known for years that something wasn't right, that she had seen patterns, heard comments, felt tension, and still she chose not to intervene when I asked her why she didn't answer right away. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. I was scared, not of me, not of conflict, of losing control. She said she was afraid that if she spoke up, everything would fall apart. So she stayed quiet and told herself she was protecting everyone, including me. That was when I finally spoke. I told her that silence never felt like protection, that it felt like abandonment, that every time she stayed quiet, I learned I wasn't worth the discomfort. Her face changed. Not in defense, in recognition. She whispered, "I didn't realize. That's what I was teaching you." I believed her, but believing her didn't erase the past. She started crying then. Not loudly, not in a way that asked for comfort. Just tears that came when she ran out of justifications. She said something then that stayed with me. "I didn't lose you when you left." She took a breath. "I lost you every time I stayed silent." That sentence held years of weight. For the first time, she wasn't framing her choices as misunderstandings. She was naming them. She asked if it was too late, not to fix everything, just to understand. I told her the truth. That understanding mattered, but it didn't come with guarantees. That healing wasn't something you could rush just because you finally saw the damage. She nodded, not in agreement, in acceptance. She didn't ask me to move back. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She just asked if we could keep talking. That request felt different, not like a need, like an acknowledgement. For the first time, she wasn't asking me to make things easier for her. She was sitting with the discomfort she had avoided for decades. I realized then that this wasn't about reunion. It was about reckoning. She was finally looking at the cost of all the time she chose peace over truth. And I was finally seeing her, not as the mother who failed me, but as a person who made choices out of fear and lived with the consequences. That didn't erase the distance between us, but it changed its shape. It wasn't filled with confusion anymore. It was filled with clarity, and clarity, as painful as it is the beginning of something real. But real doesn't always mean repair. Sometimes it just means seeing things for what they are. Understanding doesn't always arrive with a second chance. Sometimes it arrives after the door has already closed. After that conversation, nothing between us went back to the way it was. But it didn't fall apart either. We kept talking, slowly, carefully. There were no dramatic reunions, no sudden closeness, just two people learning how to speak honestly after years of silence. My mom tried in her own way. She listened more. She didn't interrupt. She didn't explain things away. When I spoke about the past, she didn't defend herself. That mattered, but something else was also true. I didn't lean in. Not because I wanted distance, but because I no longer knew how to need her the way I once had. That part of me had already learned how to survive alone. She noticed it eventually. One day, she said quietly, "I wish I had realized sooner." I didn't disagree. Sooner might have changed things. Sooner might have softened the distance. But sooner was gone. What we had now was honesty without illusion. She began talking about her regrets without expecting reassurance. She admitted that staying silent had cost her more than she ever imagined. Not just with me, with others too. The people she had protected had moved on once they got what they needed. And now she was left with the weight of choices she could no longer undo. I didn't feel satisfaction in that, just sadness, because karma doesn't always arrive to punish. Sometimes it arrives to teach, and the lesson came too late to give her back what she wanted most. There was one moment that stayed with me. She looked at me and said, "I thought you'd always be there." Not as an accusation, as a realization. And for the first time, she understood what she had lost. Not a child who left angrily, but a child who learned not to rely on her. That loss didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, over years. In every moment, she chose peace over protection. I told her something then that surprised us both. "I don't hate you." It was true. I had let go of that a long time ago. But I also told her something else. I can't be who I was before. She nodded. She didn't argue. She finally understood that forgiveness doesn't always mean restoration. Sometimes it just means release. We didn't end with promises. We ended with understanding. And maybe that was enough. Not enough to rebuild the past, but enough to stop repeating it. Today, our relationship exists in a quieter form. Honest, limited, real. She knows now that silence is not neutral, that choosing not to speak is still a choice, and that some losses don't come from cruelty, but from fear. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's this. A parent's silence can shape a child's entire world. And when that silence finally breaks, it may bring clarity, but it won't always bring them back. Understanding came to her in the end, but what she lost slowly, long before she realized it was gone. As someone who has spent years listening to family stories like this, I want to say something important. Most parents who hurt their children don't do it out of cruelty. They do it out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of losing control, fear of things falling apart if they speak up. Silence often feels like the safest option, but silence is never neutral. When a parent stays quiet in moments that matter, a child doesn't hear peace. They hear absence. They learn that their pain is less important than comfort. That truth is negotiable, that love has conditions. And over time, they adapt. They stop asking. They stop explaining. They stop needing. From the outside, that looks like strength. But inside, it's distance being built, brick by brick. What's painful about stories like this is not that understanding never comes. It often does. But understanding that arrives too late cannot undo the years shaped by silence. Forgiveness, when it happens, doesn't always restore closeness. Sometimes it simply ends the cycle. And that matters too. If you're a parent listening to this, ask yourself something gently. Not, did I mean well, but did I show up when my voice mattered? And if you're someone who grew up learning to be strong too early, know this. Your distance is not a failure. It's a response. Healing doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means finally seeing the truth without carrying the weight of blame. If this story resonated with you, if it stirred memories or questions you've carried quietly for years, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more people who need stories like this find their way here. And consider subscribing to the channel. These stories aren't just about karma. They're about reflection, emotional awareness, and the quiet truths that shape our lives. You're not alone in what you've felt. And sometimes, hearing a story like this is the first step toward understanding your own. Thank you for staying until the end.